So Mordecai was never supposed to be the bad guy. He was always the tall, cool, blue counterpart of the chaotic energy of Rigby. He was like the guy with the car, a job, and he even had a crush and also a sense of responsibility. But somewhere along the way, fans, we started to notice something. Something was off. The Mordecai charm, it started to fade. The antics felt less funny, and the more you watched the show, the clearer it became. Mordecai might have become the worst character on the show. Not because he was annoying or boring, but because he's a selfish, emotionally immature friend in quotation who rarely takes accountability for the chaos he causes. So this is how Mordecai fooled all of us and why everyone started slowly turning on him. In the beginning, Mordecai, he seemed like the adult in the room, like the person who would clean up for Rigby's mess, and he even tried to keep the job at the park and is often the one with the reasoning of the two of them. But this image is just surface level, and once you dig deeper into specific episodes, there's a pattern that starts to emerge, and you'll realize slowly that Mordecai isn't this cool, calm, collected friend, but he's actually really manipulative. But he plays off as the good guy role just long enough to make Rigby look like he's the problem. But in truth, he's the one who constantly exploits Rigby's loyalty, even bullies him when no one's watching, and only acts supportive when there's something in it for him. So let's start with the infamous Punchies episode. On paper, it's one of the funniest setup. Mordecai and Rigby argues over who gets to be player 1 in a new video game. And to settle this problem, they play their usual game of punches. But here's where it turns dark. Mordecai, he already knows that he's way stronger than Rigby. He knows Rigby can't win, and yet he takes the obvious pleasure in punching him across the room. Look at his face. He's even smiling. He's not even trying to settle a disagreement. He's asserting dominance. Rigby even says it himself. You only play punches because you know that I cannot beat you. And Mordecai, he just laughs. So this isn't a game. It's low-key physical bullying disguised as bro behavior. And what really makes it worse is that many fans, especially during the first time viewings, completely missed how toxic this behavior was. That's how well the writers wrapped Mordecai in the relatable everyman cloth. But if you go back, you can now see the cracks in the show. Punches becomes less of a silly inside joke between friends and more of a metaphor for how Mordecai constantly needs to win, whether it's over Rigby or over his romantic rivals or even over his own feelings of inferiority. It's always about him maintaining control. And Mordecai, he doesn't really stop there. When Rigby finally decides to train and learn the Death Punch move, Mordecai doesn't let him have that win either. So instead, Mordecai, he starts to train in the same dojo and he learns the Death Block. So now he's not just stronger, but he's making sure that Rigby never gets a moment of glory. The entire episode ends with Mordecai letting Rigby win, not because he respects him, but because he's tired of fighting. And this dynamic repeats across the series. So anytime Rigby grows or pushes back, Mordecai undercuts him, not directly, not with violence, but with passive-aggressive moves, guilt-tripping or backhanded comments. Not really a friend you wanna have around. And then we get the episode Lift With Your Back. One of the hardest episodes to watch once you realize the dynamic. Mordecai, he keeps asking Rigby to cover for him at work so he can hang out with CJ. And of course Rigby says yes, and again, because he's trying to be a good friend. But when Rigby finally asks for recognition, Mordecai humiliates him in front of everybody. Without me, you'll be useless. And that line is brutal. Not just because it's mean, but because it reflects how Mordecai really sees Rigby as someone beneath him, someone who owes him, someone whose worth is tied to how useful they are to Mordecai's world. And when Rigby calls him out, Mordecai, he doesn't really apologize. He doubles down. It's the least thing you can do, he says. And it's not just Rigby. Look at what Mordecai does during other people's milestones. Let's take Muscle Man's wedding for an example, one of the hardest episodes to watch. And the episode, it should have been about love and family, right? But what does this Mordecai guy do? After reading an emotional letter from Muscle Man's dad that brings the entire crowd to tears, Mordecai, he takes the mic, talk about his relationship issues. CJ is right there, Margaret is in the audience, and instead of being quiet and showing restraint, he makes the entire moment about himself. That's not just poor timing, that's just narcissism disguised as vulnerability. And what does Muscle Man do? He calls it out. It's one of the few times another character says out loud what the audience was screaming at their screens. But perhaps one of the most heartbreaking betrayal comes in the graduation arc. Rigby finally decides to better himself and go back to school and work hard to earn his diploma. And literally everyone supports him, except for one person, Mordecai. He doesn't help with the speech, he doesn't show excitement, he doesn't even lift a finger. And when he's finally confronted, he admits the truth. I like being better than you. And that's not really friendship, that's resentment. That's someone who can't stand to see his friend shine without feeling like he's fading. The damage Mordecai does isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, the eye roll, the moment where he just doesn't show up. And while fans might brush it off as part of his "oh, I'm too cool" personality, the truth is that the emotional absence is still a form of betrayal. And when Rigby needs encouragement, Mordecai, he gives him criticism. When others celebrates Rigby's growth, Mordecai, he sulks in the background. He was more comfortable seeing Rigby as a screw-up because it made his own flaws easier to ignore. And eventually the fans started to pick up on it. What used to be small grips on Reddit or Twitter snowballed into full essays. Dozens of YouTubers began posting video breakdowns pointing out how Mordecai's arc wasn't just flawed, it was never really redemptive. And the show let him get away with so much. He rarely apologized with any sincerity. All he did was cause chaos, drama and pain, and always moved on like nothing really happened. Meanwhile, Rigby, he changed. Eventually he matured. He owned his own flaws. He apologizes, and the contrast made Mordecai look worse with every episode. Even Mordecai's relationships were toxic. He didn't just have a love triangle. He dragged it out for seasons with CJ and Margaret, and even with Seth, and even random girls along the way. It always felt like Mordecai needed a partner to validate him, but never put in the emotional effort to deserve that partner. He wanted romance without responsibility, feelings without communication, and when things eventually fell apart, all he did was sulk. He didn't fix things. He didn't actually grow. He just bounced to the next distraction. And let's not forget about how Mordecai acted on impulse and then expected everyone else to deal with his fallout. He kissed Margaret at the worst possible moment. He made reckless decisions at work that endangered the park. He ghosted people emotionally, even while pretending to be emotionally overwhelmed himself. And somehow the show often excuses as just how he is. But being emotionally unstable doesn't excuse selfishness. It just makes it more dangerous. And maybe that's the saddest part of all. Mordecai had all the tools to become a great character. A relatable one. A flawed but likable protagonist. But he never really grew up. Not emotionally at least. Not socially. Not spiritually. He stayed stuck in the same mindset while everyone around him actually evolved. Pops, he learned to face his destiny. Skips, he revealed his tragic past. Rigby went from being a clown to actually capable. But Mordecai, still flaking on friends, still prioritizing his drama over everyone else's big moments, still sabotaging the people who actually love him the most. Even Benson, who spent most of the series as a frustrating boss, grew into a more layered character by the final seasons. We saw his vulnerable side, his disappointment, and his attempts to connect with the park staff in a more respectful way. But Mordecai never really reciprocated that growth. He stayed in the loop of apologizes without change, gestures without depth, and relationships without clarity. It's the emotional equivalent of spinning your wheels, and eventually fans got tired of it. In contrast, Rigby became the emotional center of the series. He had his own arc, one that wasn't actually forced but felt earned. We saw him fail, we saw him get back up, we saw him mess up relationships, then work to repair them, and most importantly, we saw him support his friends without making it about himself. While Mordecai wallowed in indecision, self-pity, Rigby actually made some progress. He moved forward, and that made all the difference. So in the end, Mordecai was never the nice guy that we all thought. He just wore a mask really well, but behind the calm voice, behind the cool posture, was someone deeply insecure, someone who needed to feel superior to stay sane, someone who couldn't be happy unless the people around him were a little bit beneath him. And maybe that's why fans turned on him, not because he was a bad person, but because he was real, actually a little bit too real. The kind of friend many of us actually know in real life, the one who always makes your moments about them, always needs to be right, and never says sorry unless they're actually forced to. That's not really a hero, that's a sad hidden villain. And sometimes the worst characters aren't the ones blowing stuff up or breaking the rules. They're the ones who smile while slowly breaking your spirits and calls it a friendship.